I want to start with the venture capital landscape because Greylock has seen some companies go public recently, Dropbox and Zuora. How did those exits impact Greylock's appetite for multi-stage investing versus the traditional A rounds?
I mean, I think that we try to focus primarily on the early stages, but we believe in being a partner through the whole process. So I think one of the things that's unique about what we do is not only will we be the first investor, but we can help shepherd those companies through that whole process to being public and large scale.
Given the amount of capital that's flooding into this market and huge funds like SoftBank, we just saw Toyota make a $500 million investment in Uber. How is that changing your strategy?
Well, I think for the companies that we work with, in many ways, it's a really positive thing. You're seeing companies be able to get access to more capital and do more audacious, big ideas. And
that also means more competition, though, right?
I think that most of the competition that we see is the traditional venture capital folks. So those early stage investors, whether it's Sequoia or Benchmark or Andreessen, et cetera, like we tend to see those as our primary partners as well as competitors. It hasn't dramatically changed that Series A and Series B at this point, but it definitely changes the later stage.
So what are the next big trends? If social networking was one and Greylock was there, and then it was the sharing economy and Greylock was there, what is next?
Well, I mean, we focus really on two main areas, consumer investments and enterprise investments. I tend to focus more on enterprise. And we also are thinking about what I'll call sort of new opportunistic areas of investment. So obviously autonomous vehicles is a thing that everyone's talking about, and we've done some investments there.
Right, a self-driving van company called Nuro?
Right, so Nuro is a great example where what we're trying to do is take the part of the sort of delivery of goods and services that oftentimes are done by people, and how you can actually make that autonomous. So for example, if you want to order groceries, you don't have to have a person drive to your house anymore. The idea is that this vehicle will drive from the grocery store and show up at your house, and you have to walk out, you open the device, but there's no person actually even in the car. So we're going after places like that where we think that there's some really interesting vertical applications of things like self-driving vehicles.
So, talk to us about big data. Another one of your portfolio companies, Sumo Logic, competes sort of with Palantir, which has been a very controversial big data company. What is the opportunity that you see there? I mean, there's been so much data unleashed, but it hasn't been proven that it can actually be useful.
Right. I mean, I think that you highlight probably the biggest issue around data. People just collect more and more data, but data without insight is pretty useless, right? And so Sumo Logic, the space that they focus on is around machine data. So all of these servers and computers and devices that are creating things, how do you manage those and understand what the health of they are, the health of those systems, how well they're performing? Basically, it's the dashboard to run the internet, if you will. So they tend to compete more with a company called Splunk, which is in the machine data space. And what they do is they basically are taking this literally terabytes and terabytes, hundreds of terabytes of data every single day, and helping companies understand what that information means in terms of how their systems are running. So whether you're Airbnb or Marriott, both who are customers, they use it to make sure that they're understanding and managing the infrastructure that they run the digital economy on.
So talk to me about how you are harnessing the power of big data at Gladly. And I mean, the goal is to change the customer service experience, which I think we would all agree needs to be improved.
Well, the application there is really an interesting one. One is to really understand, one example is to understand what are the questions that customers are asking of companies. So for example, JetBlue is one of our customers that we've talked about. And what we do with them is we see all the questions that customers ask, and we basically help to suggest answers first to their crew members so that they can drive better efficiency and also deliver better answers. So if you're asking questions like, what's the baggage policy question, how can we make sure that that customer is getting the right answer and also helping to drive efficiency so you get a better experience as a customer using machine learning, and you also can help them lower the cost of actually running their content.
How do you balance having machines and AI do the work versus good old-fashioned humans, especially when these are often situations where people are frustrated?
Right. So we start with the idea that we want to first make the people that are doing the help more efficient, meaning the agents. So our approach is to say, let's make the crew members that are engaging with the JetBlue's customers, how do we make them smarter to start with? Because if we can suggest an answer, if we're right 50% of the time, we've just improved their efficiency dramatically. If you're a customer and you're only right 50% of the time, you don't have a very good experience. So we're really focused first on making the person doing the support and help, make them smarter, and then they're making the decision to say, oh yes, this is the right answer that I'm going to give to the customer or not.
Now, in your former life, you founded a cybersecurity company. You've testified before Congress on these matters. What are your thoughts on continued reports about election meddling from now multiple state actors? I mean, it seems like there is no level of security which will protect us.
Clearly, at a state level, it's a challenging issue for every single country. Our country in particular, the U.S. We're obviously a target for many, many people, and it's clear that it's not just election meddling. It's the power grid. It's our utility system. It's everything that sort of powers the way we live, and it's a real risk. It's definitely a real risk, and I think one of the things that's been great to see over the last decade is actually the partnership between government and industry to work more closely together to help solve these problems. And I think the only way we're going to solve it is actually through innovation and new technology companies. Because as the threats evolve, you need to get new technologies to solve them. And I just think that it's going to be this never-ending battle, if you will, to keep up and continue to defend.
That said, you could also argue that technology and innovation created this problem. I mean, Google and Facebook and Twitter are now these massive platforms that are, potentially in a way unprotectable.
Yeah.
Is that fair? A fair analysis?
I mean, I think that it's true that, look, our society today is built on a digital foundation. Mm-hmm. That's very different than it was 50 or 100 years ago. And when you have that digital foundation, the need to protect it, both security and privacy, because there's two sides of this coin, right? As individual consumers, I care about my privacy. I want to make sure no one gets access to my data. But as a company or as a country, to be able to protect that infrastructure, the data, I mean, it is a never-ending challenge. And you're right, it is a new challenge that we face, but it's not going away anytime soon.
So you're obviously bullish on the new economy, given your focus on enterprise, your history in cyber. With companies as big as Microsoft out there, Salesforce, rising companies like Slack, we just talked to
Right.
Stuart Butterfield. Do you think there's room for new, smaller, up-and-coming players, or will they just get eaten by the bigger companies that have more resources and indefinite runway?
I'm definitely biased, so I will admit that going in. But look, I think that if you look back over the last 50 years in Greylock's history of the companies we funded, it's always been a cycle where there's new companies, new incumbents that do things differently and ultimately become those big companies. I mean, Salesforce was only started about 20 years ago. I mean, they were a startup just across the street, and look at them today. And we see that trend continuing. We actually don't see that changing. It doesn't mean that every company becomes a Workday or a LinkedIn, but we know that there will be some that do.